Welcome to the November 1st, 2018 meeting of the Murfreesboro City Council. Councilman Bill Shacklet has our prayer and our pledge. Actually, we have a group to do our pledge, so I'll announce them whenever we're done with our prayer.
That's great. Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of friends I want to introduce to you that are new to our community. Dr. Bill Kraus with H3ARC, which is the old Mayor's Homeless Task Force. If you would come up there, and he's going to tell us a little bit about H3ARC and what they're doing. And then Major Joe Irvin with the Salvation Army is going to tell us a little bit about the Salvation Army and what's coming in the holiday seasons and offer the prayer for us. So, Dr. Bill?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, ladies and gentlemen of the audience. I am here basically just to bring greetings and bring an opening welcome that I have been here exactly 2 months with the HARC group. I have to say three things, and one probably spells out Murfreesboro more than anything that I could express. I have met many, many people in these short 2 months from throughout the community. And in all the communities that I've been with, served, etc., over the years, I have never seen a community with such dedicated, passionate, and committed people, not only for the betterment of their city, but the betterment of their families, betterment of their community, their children, the citizens. So I think starting with our group, working with this phenomenal series of resources. HARC is now somewhat of the umbrella agency, reflective of nearly 55 organizations in the Rutherford County area, specifically within Murfreesboro. I also want to compliment the city because of one of the programs that has recently been instituted with the police department and the police task force. And we had the pleasure to meet with your captain, who was so innovative, and met both as far as a committee as well as at our general membership meeting here a week ago. And we look for a phenomenal partnership in that area. We're finally looking at so many of the programs that have been talked about, discussed, analyzed, reported: affordable housing, immediate response to people in immediate need, education, healthcare. So we're here as a partner, we're here as a dedicated, committed, and certainly passionate member of your community, and we want to thank Murfreesboro for its past support, and we look forward to a good, long friendship and relationship. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank
you. Councilman Shacklet, thank you for the invitation, to provide the invocation. Mayor McFarland and the rest of the City Council, thank you for the privilege of opening your meeting tonight in prayer. I am Major Joseph Irvin of the Salvation Army. The Salvation Army is an agency of HARC, and this past year, the Salvation Army has provided over 14,000 nights lodging to homeless individuals in our community, and we have provided over 56,000 meals to the food insecure of our community. We look forward to this coming Christmas season, when the community supports us in a wonderful way through our Red Kettle campaign. And once more, thank you for letting me be here. And if you would allow me the privilege, I would like to read to you David's Psalm, the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And would you pray with me? Almighty God, we humble ourselves before you, and like David, we ask of you the blessings of your provision and your perfect providence. We ask that you would bless our fair city, that you would guide our leaders and help them to lead us down the paths of righteousness, that you would give them the wisdom to ensure justice and equity to all citizens, and that Murfreesboro would be a shining example of what it means to be an American city. Bless the city, and according to my faith, I ask this in the name of Jesus Christ. And we can say, amen.
Amen. I want to introduce the Girl Scout Troop 3052 from Barfield Elementary. They're all fifth graders. I have Brooke Barnard. If y'all will come up as I call your name. Ella Kunow, Mallory McCook, Naomi Knappel, and Zora Pitts. Their leaders are Kim Barnard and Christina Kunow. So they're going to do our pledge. So if you'll all stand for us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, ladies. Have a few other people that we want to recognize tonight. We have Daniel Ferrone. He is with Pack 538 at St. Rose. He's working on his citizenship in the community badge. Daniel, thank you for being here tonight. We appreciate that. We also have Leadership Rutherford. If you all will stand, all right, thank you all for being here. We've got a really long meeting. We know that because your cards were signed that you'll stay till the very end of the meeting, so we appreciate that. And then we also have Youth Leadership Rutherford who's here tonight. And y'all are free to leave anytime that you want. So we appreciate y'all being here. All right, we'll move into ceremonial items, and we have Mr. Greg Tucker, our Rutherford County historian, who's going to tell us a little history about Murfreesboro.
Thank you, Mayor McFarland. You know, I just recently learned from someone a good bit younger than myself that these little history discussions are now appearing on YouTube. I don't really understand what that means, but they did tell me that apparently Councilman Shacklett does the numbers.
Thank you.
I believe that was about a year ago. Can you believe it's been that long?
Oh, my goodness.
About a year ago, we were talking about the fact of the founding of Murfreesboro, and we were 200 years old. The month of November is our anniversary month, so happy birthday again. We're now 201 years old as a city. November of this year also will mark the end of what's been a very difficult campaign season. And I have been asked, and I'm sure you others have heard things similar, can't we just get along? Based on our local history, the answer in Rutherford County and Murfreesboro is yes, we can. And there are many, we can even when others are struggling. And there are a number of good examples from very difficult times. And one difficult time is what we refer to as the Reconstruction era. In most parts of the Southeast, the damage done by the Reconstruction era in the area of the economic and social aspects of life is equal to the physical damage of the war itself. But that's not the case in Rutherford County. At the initiative of a number of our local leaders, Rutherford County made rather extraordinary progress during this period. One such individual that I wanted to focus on is a fellow named William Doughty, D-O-U-G-H-T-Y, another one of our unsung and unnoted heroes. In 1860, Doughty was living in Indiana, where he was a very successful, prosperous merchant, attorney, a local politician. He was married, had 4 children. In 1861, however, he set aside all of his business interests, left his family, and joined the Union Army, the 35th Indiana Infantry, because he believed in the cause of keeping the Union together. He was given his age. He was 41 at the time. He was immediately appointed a captain and given command of a unit. And he proved very quickly to be a very aggressive out front leader. In fact, in the first year and a half of the war, he was wounded 3 times, and in each case continued to lead and was back in his position in a very short time. He did bring his unit to the Stones River battlefield, and during one over-the-top led by Captain Doughty, he was severely injured. injured such that as soon as there was a lull in the fighting, he was transferred to one of the makeshift hospitals. And when Bragg retreated with the Confederate Army, Dowdy was brought into one of the hospitals that had been set up in Murfreesboro, not expected to survive. He spent a year in the military hospital when the Rosecrans and the Federal Army moved south, leaving behind just a modest group. They took with them most of the hospital personnel. So Dowdy was then moved into a private home, and they looked to the locals to administer to him, still given very little chance of surviving. Amazingly, 2 years later, as the war was winding down, he was able to travel back to his home in Indiana. He resumed his business activity, but about a year later, decided to return to Murfreesboro. He sold all of his assets, sold his property, shuttered his business, packed up his family, and moved to Murfreesboro. Built a house which still stands on the northwest corner of Lytle and Academy, the Dowdy House, now covered over with stucco, but unique because it's so close to the street. He wanted to be where he could sit on the porch and talk to the people and the traffic on the street. He brought several things with him: an entrepreneurial spirit, an enthusiasm for this community, and a little capital. In short order, he had organized a local group and founded the only bank, post-war bank at the time, First National Bank of Murfreesboro, and began financing and encouraging the growth of industry, manufacturing activity in the area. He served as senior vice president at that bank for 2 years and then founded another bank, Stones River National Bank, which he was himself the chairman and president. And you hear names like Ransom and Earthman and Ledbetter. These were some of those that he financed and helped get them started. One interesting group was the Stones River Utility Works, a group of local businessmen who wanted to start up a cedar factory. They wanted to make buckets. And Dowdy financed their building and acquiring property and building their plant. He continued to encourage development. In fact, I'd say he was probably, more than any other individual, responsible for the industrial boom that put Murfreesboro in such a good financial condition in the 1890s. But the bucket factory prospered for about 5 years and began to stumble. Dowdy stepped up and bought the business, bought it out of foreclosure, and continued to operate it, and continued to finance others in the line of business. He also started a furniture manufacturing plant and several retail businesses on the square, and by the early 1880s was the largest private employer in Rutherford County, taking together all of his various businesses. In the mid-1880s, he turned over his business activity to his sons and engaged in his legal practice, was elected to the bench, served as a judge until his death. He died in 1889. The newspaper of the period describing his funeral said, quote, "One of the largest crowds we ever saw in Murfreesboro." The eulogy was delivered by a Confederate officer veteran who says, quote, "An energetic and public-spirited citizen, adding as much to the material prosperity of his adopted home as any man in it." This Yankee came down here and put Murfreesboro back on its feet and moved us along. We can all get along if we choose to, and if we make our common interest our special interest. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chucker. All right, ladies, y'all are free to go. So y'all don't have to wait. I know it's getting 7:30, so thank y'all for coming. Thank y'all. All right, we'll move to our consent agenda. You have 11 items on the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, if you'll please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance. Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
You have the minutes of two meetings, October 18th, special meeting and regular meeting. Any additions or deletions to the minutes?
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, if you'll call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, we'll move into new business. You have adoption of Resolution 18R30, establish annexation fee and revised fee for administratively reviewed special use permits. Mr. Anthony.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. The Planning Department has a couple of fee changes that we would like for you to consider. The first is a new application fee for annexations. We would like to set this at a flat $500. That would cover advertising, mileage that we pay out to our employees for sign delivery, and a small portion of the staff review time. The second is a revision of the application fee for special use permits that qualify for administrative approval. Currently, all projects that go to the BZA are assessed a $350 application fee. However, certain annual renewals are now exempt from BZA review and thus no longer require advertising and sign placement. So we would like to reduce the fee on those projects to $250. With regard to budgetary impact, we would anticipate these revisions leading to a slight increase in revenue, as noted in our memo to council. We believe that these fee changes will help offset costs that the city currently absorbs with annexations while treating BZA applications more fairly based on the amount of city resources required for processing. Staff can answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions for Mr. Anthony?
No questions. I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, if you'll call the roll, please.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll now move to Resolution 18R32, a reimbursement resolution for the purchase of an SCBA equipment and approval to purchase from NPP Gov for the Fire and Rescue Department. Chief.
Mayor, members of council, good evening. This resolution is a reimbursement resolution to fund the CIP project for bond issuance that will be bonded after the first of the year for replacement of all of our self-contained breathing apparatus within the department. We're making this purchase from NPP Gov, National Purchasing. This has been vetted by the legal department as well as the purchasing department. The contracts are in order and everything should be ready to go with the purchase.
Any questions for the chief?
Hearing none, I'll move for approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Ms. Wright, if you'll please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll now move into land use matters. We have the plan of services and annexation for 39.9 acres along Manson Pike and Manson Court. Planning. Ms. Green.
Good evening. You have before you tonight an application which was submitted to the Planning Commission to consider annexation of property. It probably looks familiar to you because this parcel came to you approximately a year ago for consideration. When it came to you last December, the staff left a 10-foot strip out along the northern property edge, but since then we've had a reinterpretation of what the city will and won't do, and we're comfortable now not leaving that strip. So we have revised the annexation slightly and the plan of services, which you have slightly, so that there is no more a 10-foot strip. This property is shaded orange on the map that you have, and it includes 3 parcels. We have received petitions from the property owners or the representatives requesting the annexation. This property is north of Manson Pike, and it is also north of Manson Court. Manson Court is a very small road that really only serves these 4 parcels. The property is about 39.9 acres, and we, of course, have included the plan of services in your packet. The plan of services indicates that we can provide services to the property in a reasonable time frame. There is a condition that some conditions on the property change so that we can provide fire service to this property. And similar to last year, we'll ask that the second reading be held off if you decide to move this forward until the property can be brought up to standards, either adding a fire hydrant, increasing the capacity of the driveway, and removing the trees that line the drive so that a fire truck may access the structures, or that the structures are removed. It's our anticipation that once the proposed developer who has a contract on the property closes, that they'll just remove the house because they do not intend to have anybody live here, as there are development plans for your consideration that will be on the next agenda. You have the plan of services, so if you have any questions about it, I'd be glad to answer them either before or after the public hearing. The representative of the application is here prepared to speak on the matter of the zoning, but this is just for you to consider the annexation. But if you have questions from them, they'll be glad to answer them. The Planning Commission's recommendation to you is that you do approve this. The recommendation was unanimous, and all 7 members were present the evening of the public hearing. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Any questions for Ms. Green? All right, we're going to need to hold a public hearing on the plan of services, the annexation, and the PUD. Anyone wishing to speak for and against, if you'll come to the podium, if you'll state your name, your address. If you're representing an individual yourself, you'll have 3 minutes. A group, you'll have 5 minutes. If you'll ask all questions to the council, direct those to us. We'll get those answered at the end of the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this plan of services and annexation, please come to the podium. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. We'll consider Resolution 18R PS 56 to adopt the plan of services. All right, anyone have a motion on the plan of services?
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. Ms. Wright, go call the roll, please.
Vice Mayor Scales Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll now consider Resolution 18RA 56 to adopt the annexation.
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Scales Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll now hear from Ms. Green on the PUD.
As mentioned, there is a companion zoning change request that was made with the annexation petition. This zoning change request is actually being made by potential developers of the property who are Crescent Homes, as a zoning application can be made by anybody with a contract. This property this petitions for the properties which you just approved annexation, plan of services, and petition. It's located just north of Manson Pike and Manson Court along 840, although it has no access to 840. It does include 3 parcels and a portion of right-of-way. That portion of right-of-way has a request to be abandoned, and that will be considered on today's agenda as well. The PRD or PUD has a program book that accompanies it, and that has been provided to you in your PDF for your review. In just a moment, the representatives of the applicants are going to come up and go through a detailed presentation of the matter. This should also seem familiar to you, because last year you considered a PUD called Hardeman Grove. They have modified the proposed PUD and have renamed it to Shelton Grove. Just north of this development is the Shelton Square development, which you're probably familiar with, which is a rather large development. You can see on the map that it's the property zoned PRD. So they're proposing to zone this property, which is 39.9 acres, to PUD to allow 2 commercial lots at the corner of the entrance, and then the remainder of the property to consist of single-family detached residential and single-family attached residential, which is more commonly referred to as townhomes. The plan which you reviewed last year and did make a motion to approve, although never considered it on second reading, was to allow 160 single-family detached dwellings and 2 commercial lots. The now proposed Shelton Grove proposes to have 95 detached lots and 118 single-family attached homes, which are those townhomes I mentioned, for a total of 213 residences. So the previous plan This is an increase of 53 dwelling units over the previous plan, and the density change has gone from 4.3 to 5.7. There are various different types of houses in here and lot sizes, and that's what Mr. Mulchin is going to go through with you in just a moment. I have outlined the exceptions to the zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations, which they're requesting. They're also clearly specified in the program book. We did mention that the commercial lots, at least one of them, has an odd geometry and may be difficult to develop upon, and have put the applicant on notice that variance would not be an option, that they need to meet our standards, and they're aware of that. The comprehensive plan does recommend that this area develop as business park. The residential use of this property is not consistent with the business park proposed type land use, although we believe that the commercial lots would be consistent. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have. The Planning Commission did consider and discuss this matter at length. Some of their questions included how solid waste will be serviced to the townhomes, and setbacks for the garages. And I've asked Mr. Mulchin to go into details on those as well to make sure it's clear to you. If you have questions, I'll be glad to answer them either before or after the public hearing. The Planning Commission's vote was 7-0 in favor of recommending the zoning change request as submitted.
Any questions for Ms. Green?
Ms. Green,
Yeah.
is there, and I apologize if it's on here somewhere, but I could never see it. Is there a road that's going to connect from Shelton Square through this property all the way to Manson Pike?
No. Well, I'll show you the layout. And the Shelton Square development does not have any townhouses. Well, here, it's not all the way through when you, and I'm going to bring this up on the screen and show you the connection point. This is Shelton Square, and that's where they have a stub, and this will stub into it. But then here's a road, so it doesn't go straight through, but it does connect to the subdivision. That's probably what you were talking about. I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah, so they will be able to come out of Shelton Square. Sorry, our screen's not working up here, but they'll be able to come out of Shelton Square and then come straight out onto Manson Pike through this neighborhood.
Yep.
With one turn, yep. All right. Gotcha. And another bigger picture question that we might want to ask beforehand: why would it be in the 2035 plan for this to be business park as opposed to this type of usage? I mean, is there a big picture reason why it would be that way?
I think as a general rule, we were looking for, with business park also, the land use is not what you may consider as those business parks that we developed in the 80s, which were more industrial. And our comprehensive plan describes it as basically an area that provides employment. So some of the office developments in the gateway would qualify, not really what we would see off the Industrial Drive. So it's very near the interstate. You can see that actually the interstate is contiguous with a portion of this property, and I suspect that its proximity to the interstate would probably, some people may not want to live in that area, so they were looking for alternative use for property this close to the interstate. Sometimes the road noise is very loud, particularly at night.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Mr. Mulchin.
I don't know how to get my drawing off the screen.
Control Alt Delete.
Where's Mr. Clark?
That'd be the easiest thing, wouldn't it? All right. Thank you, Mayor McFarland, members of the Commission. Rob Mulchin, the SEC, here tonight on behalf of Crescent Homes to present to you a revised vision for Shelton Grove. As Margarine alluded to, Shelton Grove is located just to the north of Manson Pike and to the east of Blackman Road, and then along the Interstate 840 on that side. You can see the aerial photograph here. The property currently is pretty much agricultural or a vegetated type area on that side with the proximity to the interstate. We talked about some of the different land uses, but I also want to talk about some of the existing conditions in regards to the types of zonings that are out there. As you can see, to the north is the PRD for Shelton Square. To the south and southeast, on the corner of Blackman Road and Manson Pike, are a couple of commercial lots, zoning areas from the county on that side. And the large green area off to the southwest is the new park lot that you guys appropriated last year on that side. As we talked about just a moment ago in regards to the land use plan, this area is dedicated as a business park area on that side. I think as Margaret Ann talked about, you can see the change to the overall context. The land use plan has changed greatly with the addition of the park, which you can see was the large blue area that was originally supposed to be business park as well. And there was also another property to the other side of the interstate that was also supposed to be business park that was changed over to a planned residential district as well. So I think the nature and the culture of this area has changed in the last couple of years since the land use plan was brought about. And I think that the residential and or commercial uses that we're proposing with this property are more in tune with the change of the overall land use character that the plan originally envisioned on that side. So a couple quick slides, give you some views of what this is. This is actually Manson Court, and up on the right-hand side is the Manson Pike flyover, the interstate there, so that gives you a little context about what that existing little road, as we talked about, only actually accesses these couple lots that are involved on this corner of the property. This is a picture of the property itself. You can see agricultural lands, hay fields and such at this point in time. This is a view more or less kind of at the intersection of Manson Court with Manson Pike. Now this would be also the views that you'd see at the intersection, which is actually the entrance to the development on that side. So this is looking back up over the interstate on that side. And then the next view here is looking down towards, as it curves back towards Blackburn Road on that side. So that's kind of the view shed, and the roadway structure that you have right now is a 3-lane cross section, but Manson Pike is deemed to be expanded to a 5-lane cross section in the major thoroughfare plan. This is the existing Citgo station at the corner of Manson and Blackburn Road. Just give you a little bit of commercial character that's already out there. And again, some of the older commercial structures along Blackburn Road just next door to the Citgo station. This is looking south at the intersection of Blackburn Road and Manson Pike, and the park property is off to your right-hand side on that side. And this is just a little character of the homes that back up to the property along Blackman Road there. These are still zoned in the county side of things, so these are existing county properties. The existing plan that we brought forth last year had 160 single-family detached lots, so you had about 4.36 dwelling units to the acre was what the density was on that. A little bit more, almost close to 6 acres of open space on the property on that side. Minimum lot size is about 5,500 square feet, and you had 3 different lot sizes with the minimum lot size being 41 feet, and also some commercial acreage, about 2.4 acres. The currently proposed plan, as you can see, the change mainly is in regards to the change in the use type in regards to the types of lots. The residential portion and the commercial portions have interchanged a little bit in regards to the acreages on that side, but these will be all public streets with inside, except for the private alleyways behind the townhomes. This will be a walkable community with underground utilities. Property itself going from the original plan up to 213 single-family units on that side, so the density's gone up to 5.6, so a little more than 1.4 units to the acre increase between the previous plan and this one. The acreage, the open space has also gone up a little bit on that side. As Margaret Ann talked about, we were looking at 95 single-family detached lots with 3 different lot structures, either a 41, a 46, or a 51-foot wide lot structure in regards to the size of the lots themselves. And the 118 single-family townhome lots you can see more or less clustered around the south and southeastern portion of the property, more or less along the Manson Pike area. So more or less separating ourselves from the Shelton Square area with our more loosely dense packed single-family lots on that side, and then the adjacent county properties as well. Single-family attached lots that I was talking about there, you can see the clustering of the homes, the more higher dense product. The 41s are in the darker green, the middle range. The 50s are in the lighter green, and the really brightly shaded homes, which are the 67-foot wide lots, are actually the ones in back of the Shelton Square, which are more condusively in regards to the types of lots that are planned in the Shelton Square development. Here's a quick little diagram in regards to how the setbacks will be. I have a 35-foot front setback in regards to the garage, but the actual architecture of the home will protrude up to about 15 foot off the setback from the sidewalk on that side. That way they bring these architectural elements up close to the street and creating a very walkable neighborhood with some porch elements as well. Maybe a little character about the homes themselves. As you can see, these 1 or 2 story homes, minimum 1,500 square feet of livable space. These will be minimum 2-bedroom homes. They'll have a 2-car front entry garage, and they'll be a part of a HOA association. Materials will be all masonry type materials. The front elevations will be comprised of a mixture of brick, stone, or cementatious fiberboard. The sides and rears will be the cementatious fiberboard. Vinyl will be only permitted in the trim and soffit areas on this, and they will all have a covered front porch or stoop element to engage the streetscape. And a couple of character sketches of what some of the homes are anticipated to look like. Moving on to the new portion of the project, you can see, as I talked about, the majority of these are the single-family attached lots. These are the townhomes. These are the ones that I talked about being more at the southern and southeastern quadrant of the development. On that side, you can see this is a version of what we anticipate the townhomes look like in regards to setbacks. There was some discussion during Planning Commission in regards to the setbacks. I think there was a little bit of confusion. We had talked about there being a 5-foot side setback. The 5-foot side setback, and that notation has been corrected in your pattern books to that side. There is actually 3 different types of setbacks in regards to the townhomes themselves. One is actually a side setback to the corner, like in the corner elements that you see in the end there. That's a 10-foot side setback to the actual streetscape on that side. And then there'll also be a 10-foot front setback to the townhomes, to the streets on that side. The discrepancy that was misunderstood during Planning Commission was that there was a 5-foot side setback. There was a misunderstanding that the 5-foot side setback was between garages, when actually this is a 0 lot line configuration with any townhome. That the 5-foot side setback is simply for between the actual structures of the townhomes themselves. So whether it be a 4, 5, 6, or 7, or 8 unit cluster of homes, it's 5 feet from the actual townhome building to the property line, which gives it a 10-foot separation between townhome buildings on that side. But it would be a 0 lot line setback in regards to between the structures and also the garages at the back on that side. As you can see in the diagram here, you can see we're looking at these garages will be an optional element with this product. This would be partly driven by the marketplace and by the buyer. So as we go through this, we're giving the opportunities that either you have a 4-car parking area behind the townhome, or a 3-car with a 1-car garage element, or a 2-car with a 2-car outside garage. So still allocating the appropriate 4 parking spaces per unit on each lot on that side that meets the ordinance requirements on that side. Townhomes themselves will be 2-story structures. There'll be a minimum 1,000 square feet of living space, minimum 2 bedrooms on that side. Again, as I talked about just a moment ago, 4 parking spaces will be provided via the rear private alleyways behind the homes, and this will be also part of the HOA. Again, materials will be the same as what we have with the single-family detached product on that side. Brick, stone, and cementatious fiberboard on the fronts with a cementatious fiberboard on the sides and rears. Vinyl in them will be stuck to these soffits and fascia, and these will have covered front porches as well. As we talked about in the previous plan, the development's been looked at in a different light. We looked at this in a couple of different aspects of special focus lots. As you can see in your pattern book, 3 different types of special focuses. One would be corner or multiple frontages. So those that are deemed as corner or multiple frontage lots will have actual architectural elements that were provided for the front side of the home will actually engage the extra side. So like you have a corner element. Those that are actually on corners will actually have a brick, cement, and fiberboard siding in regards to the fronts as well. You're also looking at homes that terminate on vistas or views down the streets on that side, so the triangular lots. Those are homes that are more or less are at the ends of streets, so you have a very strong terminus view, so good architectural elements are anticipated of that as well. You also have homes that front onto parks and open spaces, as you can see with the little green boxes. So the main focal point in the community is the large central green. Most of those homes will have those types of characteristics involved with those special focus lots. Just give you a couple of perspectives of what we envision the neighborhood to look like. This is looking down the street with the single-family detached homes. Another view of that as well, looking out from the park. And this is a view looking at the townhome character that we're anticipating to help blend between the two. So the architecture between the townhomes and single family will be a cohesive type of distinct look for the neighborhood itself. Amenities that I spoke about a second ago, the main amenity focus is the major large park at the center of this. It will be the gathering space for the neighborhood in regards to that. We'll have a playground and a large lawn for active outdoor. We'll also have a couple passive seating areas for neighbors to come sit and talk. But this will be a great gathering spot for everyone in the neighborhood to come gather as a neighborhood, and also for a great place for kids to have a great place for recreation outdoors on that side, pick up football games and such on that side. Talking about amenities, we'll also be including a decorative lighting element. And we're moving on to the commercial lots. Margaret Ann talked about we do have 2 commercial lots. They are centered around the main entrance off of Manson Pike, to the right and left of that. We have no immediate users at this point in time, but we do have a list in your book of allowable uses that we've deemed from the commercial fringe portion of the zoning ordinance that we felt were the best conducive uses that were more or less a neighborhood type use on that side, so a smaller type use. These are very small lots on that side, so we're thinking about like a coffee shop or something like those kind of neighborhood functional type of elements that would be programmed best into this, that be allowing for the neighbors and also the surrounding developments to take advantage of on that side. Talked about setbacks in regards to the commercial. The front setback to Manson Pike will be 30 feet. Sides will be anything from 10 foot, and the rears will be 20 foot on that side. Again, building materials will be the same as what we, more in line with what we had for the residential store. Pretty much masonry type stuff, vinyl and metal in trim areas only. The applied stucco cement as well will be a applied material on that side. So these are all kind of outlined in your booklet. We'll also be including a residential buffer. It'll be a type C landscape buffer with a 6-foot tall opaque fence that will help shield more or less the residential areas from the commercial areas in regards to headlights and noise and such that would come from those commercial elements along the edge of the residential portion of the development. Access itself, Mr. Lance had some questions. The main entrance, of course, will be off of Manson Pike. We're anticipating looking at this as a kind of like a divided median entranceway with the signage off to the one of the sides on that side, so it gives you a little character feel about how we're going to really, help pull you into the neighborhood on that side. Our second point of ingress-egress was that we just talked about coming from Shelton Square. That will go directly up to the First Street in Shelton Square, which is actually the main, one of the access points back out to Blackman Road, but it will also connect to the rest of the streetscape, the rest of the streets and within Shelton Square that go back out to Florence Road too. So there'll be a good amount of interconnectivity between our developments and the other major roadways allowing this property on that side as well. We're also providing an additional stub street. This is a stub street to the remaining property that's located to the east of our property. Between our property, 840, and Shelton Square, there's a remaining tract of land there, so we're providing an access to that property for their future connection on that side. I appreciate your time and consideration of this change to the plan, and I look forward to any questions now or after the public hearing. Thank you.
I have a quick question, Mr. Marshall. What the initial plan or the original plan was 160 units or 160 single family, and then we've moved to 213. What was there something that was wrong with the original plan?
No, there's nothing wrong with the original plan. They just, as they've seen the change in the marketplace in the last year, and they felt they had a product that they thought was another piece that they can add to this. So adding another product line, but also another price point to bring another classification of buyer into the actual marketplace for these homes over here. So they have had the 3 different sizes of single family lots. They also felt that there was possibly a need for looking at a townhome component that would have a different, a lower, you say if you're thinking a lower price point in regards to the homes on sales and that side. So they're looking at trying to, instead of it being 3 price points, they're looking at a 4th price point on that side.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? All right, we'll need to hold up.
Let me ask
Yes,
one
sir.
question. Margaret Ann, this may be for you, but in the minutes from the Planning Commission meeting, a phrase that I hadn't heard before, the Planning Commission could request a dumpster to be provided for the townhomes instead of using carts. In addition, there could be a commitment made to a certain percentage to be placed on the number of garages for the townhomes. But then it goes directly to the vote. Was there anything regarding those 2 points?
Sure, there was discussion by the Planning Commission, and I think what that is saying is that there were some concerns by the Planning Commission that since the garage is optional on the townhouses, that maybe garages won't be built. And I wanted to point out to them that that is something that could happen if when the units are built, they're either in 5 or 6, groups of 5 or 6, that there could be no garages. But if it were the desire of the Planning Commission, they could ask for the program book to be amended so that a certain percentage of garages have to exist in the townhomes. They did not add that condition. Although certainly if you thought it was appropriate, you could. And also there was some conversation about the solid waste carts because these townhomes will be served by the city. And I did reach out to Joey Smith and have the developer reach out to them as well and see if this is something that they could service. And I think their concern was in the alleys where you will be loaded. There'll be 16-foot wide driveways, 4-foot grass strips, 16-foot driveways, 4-foot grass strips. And where will those carts be? And they'll probably be stored in the grass strip on service days, and likely be put either in the garage or in the courtyard in the meantime. So if they weren't comfortable with that, they could, because it's a planned development, you can add conditions where you could not do it for bulk zoning. So if they were uncomfortable with that idea, they could require that a dumpster with a private hauler be used for the townhomes as a condition of approval. They did not add that condition. Of course, you could do that if you thought it were appropriate.
So could we require, since the previous application, all the homes had all garages, could we not require that all the townhomes would all have garages? It seems like a service delivery issue if you've got no garages and you only have 4 feet to be able to put, as we're all talking about solid waste now, that figuring out on a 16-foot driveway with no garage where the trash cans are going to go, that seems like that would be an issue with no compactor that you normally see in a townhome development. Would you not?
So we are seeing a shift now where I would have answered a couple years ago, there will be a private hauler. Solid waste delivery is changing, and I'm sort of just following where it's going. We have townhomes now where they are being served by the city, where that was not our standard before. And certainly you can require all the townhomes to have garages. I would ask, that could be a condition of your approval as a planned development. We'd require that to be in the program book. And I would see, I would be interested to see why they didn't want to have garages on some of the units, if you wanted an opportunity for the developer to reply. But certainly that can be a requirement.
Mr. Malshon, is there a reason why y'all don't have garages? Is that a price point issue too?
Yeah, that's a price point. That's what they were trying to look at, is giving the option for the buyers. They come in, they'll build the townhomes themselves. The backside where the parking pads or the garages would not be built until such time that a person would come by and buy the home. So it would be an optional element just for that person that's coming to purchase the home at that point in time. So they can either leave it as is and leave it as a uncovered 4-car parking space behind the home, or go with the 1-car option, or go with the 2-car option on that side. So it was more about price point in regards to who could purchase, or what the fee would be for purchasing the home, and then what they wanted to do with the home once they purchased it on that side.
I'm just a little concerned that we don't have a policy that seems clear about townhomes. Are we going to just take these one at a time, or is there some kind of policy related to cart pickup of trash and a certain density or some kind of guidelines for them? It seems like it's kind of open-ended.
I have a policy that's not in the zoning ordinance that I'm probably not as familiar with. I don't know if you'd like to answer.
Yeah, Council, I think that would be really part of our solid waste planning, and you're right. We would have to develop a policy and think through that, but that is something that we haven't faced before. We have discussed it. There isn't a clear policy in there, and we haven't come to a conclusion yet to bring to council.
Margaret, and so we're talking about having rear load. The trash service will be in the alley.
That's right. Along the fronts would be on-street parking on one side of the road,
and so any concern from staff with the number of trash cans sitting side by side that closely together? I know we're talking about that, but I mean, rather than the dumpster service, which is, at least from my experience, more common in the townhome development.
I mean, I think there are certainly probably pros and cons to having that. It's, I guess, an evolving matter. I having been here for 14 years, are more comfortable with dumpsters, but I'm certainly open to new ways of doing things. In the past, it's been if you have 15 units or more, you will use a private hauler. But I think with us charging for solid waste, that it's sort of evolving now, and of course would take your direction. But a creature of habit would lead me to say dumpster, but I don't think that just because that's what I'm comfortable with, I don't think that's the only solution.
Mr. Malshon, how wide are these alley streets?
These alley streets themselves, they are, I'm going to double check your numbers are correct on that side. Remember, they are, more than city minimums on that side. The alleyways themselves, trying to find my diagram, sorry. There it is. The alleyways themselves, and the city minimum pavement width is actually the city minimum is 18 foot. We're actually going with a 24-foot wide private access easement, which is similar to what was done in the Three Rivers development on that side years ago on that side. There's a Three Rivers development actually has a 20-foot wide access easement back there. We're going with a 24-foot wide access easement with 20 feet of pavement, so it's two 10-foot lanes with a individual 12-inch ribbon curb along each side of that. So it's actually a 20-foot pavement surface plus an extra 2 feet of curb on either side of that. So it is a step up from what the Three Rivers on that side is. It's definitely conducive for two-way traffic on that side. In regards to trash cans and alleyways on townhomes, it's not unusual for that to happen. I think we think of a couple of good precedents here in the region. West Haven being one of those is a city trash service on that side. There's all alley. Most of their homes and or townhomes are alley serviced on that side. It has alley trash pickup on that side too, and it is a city service on that side. I'm trying to think in regards to a couple other ones, but that's one that does come to mind on that side in regards to individual cans and the alleyways for trash pickup on that.
So are those going to be private or public streets?
Those are private access easements on that side. Public streets, private alleys, sorry, my bad.
Public streets, but private alleys.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
I have one more question. The connector to Shelton Square, the connector street to Shelton Square, I have not been out there. Will that be developed? I don't know, we may not know the answer to this, but I'm just visually trying to see, will that street have access out to Florence Road in the first phase or in a phase that's under construction with Shelton Square today, or is that a later phase in Shelton Square?
The connection, I think, is a later phase because it's coming south. The sewer is also coming from the north to the south. So I have a phasing plan, which you guys can't see on your screens, I guess, but there's a phasing plan for this project, and you can see that connection is a part of phase one for this development, and a part of that is because this development requires sewer, and sewer is coming through that connection. And I expressed some concern with this development needing to wait for the development on the north, bringing sewer through, but actually Shelton Square seems to be moving right along with that sewer because it's following the roads, and they go ahead and cutting the roads in. Do you know where the sewer is now, Mr. Mulchin? I think SEC also worked on the plan to the north.
Yes, the sewer is in the process of being installed at Shelton Square. The actual first phase of Shelton Square has actually got curb and first surface down on that side. This section of Shelton Square will tie into one of the next adjacent sections. Shelton Square is developed right now in a phasing plan. It's actually phase one, but it's actually two parts. There's the two main access ways to Blackman. So there's actually one street up from where we're talking about this connection right here. There's a one street gap between that and what's already being constructed and under construction on that side. The sewer is already being brought through on that side. They're in the process right now of actually working under 24 to get the actual sewer service from Shelton back over to the other side of the interstate on that side so we can connect up on the overall city system on that side. So the roadways, the first portion of the roadways are actually in Shelton Square, so the sewers are already in that side. They're just working on getting the connection from that property back to the other side to connect in existing structures.
But that
roads, though? Roads.
Yes, what I was getting ready to say, but that's the sewer, not the road. So the road in Shelton will be a different phase.
Correct.
That will connect.
So the road that gets out to Florence to the east, it's way up towards the north side of the property, though, right? You've got a couple that go out to Blackman to the west, but the road that gets to Florence is all the way up to the north of the Shelton project.
Correct. Right now, the lowest, the southern leg of the pieces that are in place for Shelton, there's actually one of those that actually connects back to Blackman. So with the anticipation of one of the next phases in Shelton Square would be the inclusion of one of those, the next street, hopefully on that side, to connect to that first phase to get you connection back to Blackman as well. So the Florence portion, that'll be a future portion that come on later on in the stages of the development of Shelton Square. But immediately or relatively immediately in the near future, one of the next sections of Shelton Square will provide connection back to the phase one of Shelton to get the connection back to Blackman Road.
All right, let's open our public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this zoning request, please come to the podium. All right, Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. We'll now consider ordinance 18OZ56 to zone approximately 39.9 acres to PUD Shelton Grove for first reading.
If I could get somebody from staff to, I mean, I have kind of one more general question. It really goes to, I think, maybe to what he was asking about getting out to Florence Road, but just kind of the overall infrastructure. You know, when we approved the Shelton Square and farms up to the north of this, there was a concern about, you know, just the infrastructure in that area being able to handle 700 homes. We're talking about a much smaller piece of property here with, adding on another 30% of that or so. And it doesn't appear that there's been a whole lot of change in the infrastructure in that area. I mean, there's some, but is it enough? I mean, I'm concerned that people will come out of this neighborhood, take a left, go through town, come into town that way. And we've got a lot of multifamily on Manson Pike between there and Fortress, and a lot of property that's zoned for multifamily already that's going to come out onto Manson Pike to go to Fortress also, you would guess primarily at least. So from an overall perspective, both Manson Pike all the way to Fortress, as well as getting through the little four-way stop right there if they want to go out to the interstate, where are we on improving that infrastructure, and is it finalized? Do we know what it's going to look like, and how soon?
Yeah, so we think that providing a connection to Manson Pike through city streets would be an asset, because Blackman Road certainly needs some help. And the city council approved the city manager to work with, I think, Huddleston Steel to develop some plans to redesign Manson, the intersection of Manson, Blackman Road, and some of the road that runs along the property, the park property. The engineering is underway, and I spoke to Mr. Griffith today about that, and so they are designing it now. As far as budgeting, council doesn't have that in the 5-year capital improvements plan, so I don't know at what point we would see those specific changes. I suspect that we would link it to development, whether that develops as a park or something else, that we would see those improvements, a contribution at least made to whatever development happens there. And so those were particularly that four-way stop. I remember there being a lot of discussion about that link to that road there. And so that's where the plans stand now for that is they're under design, and the design is not finished, but they have not been funded.
I'm probably not going to say the part I'm having an issue with, and Mr. Malshon, this is nothing against the plan that y'all have brought through. I get density, and I understand what I'm having trouble with, and this probably goes more of an overall. We approved 160 units a year ago, and we said with the PRD, here's what we're going to go. They're single family, front entry garages, and everyone was okay with that. And relate that back 7 years ago when the economy was much different, and we were changing these PRDs left and right to be able to make the developers be able to get out of some of these. Well, now we're in an economy where it's historic how good everything is, and we're coming back adding 60 units, townhomes with no garages, making it even a more dense unit, and the thing is just for a different price point. And so that's what I'm having trouble with, that we're saying here's what the development is that we were originally bringing forward, but we're changing it, and we're not just making it 160 units. We're saying we're going to make it 30% more, but we're actually bringing a townhome unit in with no garages. And then we're left, the part I'm more concerned with is we're left to try to figure out how to provide services to that. So, because what's going to happen with 90 plus townhomes with no garages, even though that there are some that we've done before, Three Rivers is not a good example to use.
When he said that, I thought, oh no.
Yeah, I mean, I think that alleyway going back into Three River, I mean, we get emails from residents who live in Three Rivers every other day. I think Mr. Whitaker can agree with that, the ones that we get talking about the service delivery in those. So, I don't have an issue with what was approved, and I don't even have an issue with what some of the things that are approved now, but just to make it more dense, I'm not sure what's getting back, the city is getting back in giving that density is warranted. The other part I still have an issue with, Rob, and this is something to ask staff. You know, we had the Sazerac discussion a year ago, 8 months ago, and we all talked about the descent coming from the overpasses, and we talked about the density that we have out on Florence Road across from our fire station. Is there a concern at all with not having a turning lane and adding 60-plus units that, you know, someone's coming across Manson Pike or coming across 840 on Manson Pike going down that bridge, and then all of a sudden you've got more units coming in and out of that complex?
We very well may require a turn lane. I think that we would review that. We definitely would review that when we look at the subdivision, when they want to create that. It was something that we would typically ask for. So site distance is something that we look at, as you mentioned, coming down off of there, and then a safe refuge, whether they're turning in the site or they're turning out of the site. As you mentioned, a concern with people coming from this development or the development to the north into town. And I have heard similar sentiments to the ones you mentioned first. And when the design team approached me about making a change, I said, well, you have to stand in front of council, who I've heard tell me, don't just keep bringing me changes, and explain why. So I've heard that sentiment before, and I've passed it along and wanted to make sure that they were prepared to speak to that. Certainly
to the applicant, I mean, I'm just one voice, and I don't want to be the naysayer, because I'm obviously deal with this on a daily basis too, but I get density and I understand, but when you're bringing a PRD change, there needs to be substantial reasons on why you're changing that PRD. And if you're adding 60-plus units, then, you know, are amenities changing, open space changing, what is changing in the plan? And in this case, we're really adding 60-plus more units, but we're upping density, in my opinion, unless I'm wrong. I mean, maybe an option is to talk about is adding garages to these townhomes. You know, because the other part too, Mr. Molishon, is if we have 4 units in a 16-foot driveway, and we do have one person park on the street, then we can barely get a garbage truck in and out through there to be able to pick up trash. So
I think and I had this discussion with my client in regards to garages, and I think that in hearing something that I've heard from them, that I think that they would be willing to look at the option of including garages on the end units, you know, so that way you're more or less framing that alleyway up and actually, you know, narrowing down that corridor on that side. So if we can go ahead and make the change, and we'll add it to the booklet, and if you makes everything, you know, better in regards to at least having some of the units right from the get-go being mandated to have a garage unit, which would be the units on the ends, so that you close off that alleyway, so it's not a larger, you don't see that large expanse of garages and or parking spaces open to the general streetscape around the neighborhood. That will be one of those elements we can definitely, I think, based on conversations I had the last day or so, would be looking at the option of closing off the alleyways by utilizing and making certain that those end unit townhomes are required to have a garage structure on them to help mitigate that view down that alleyway on that side. I think that's definitely something that in my discussion with them, like I said, last day or two, as to is there a possible option for you guys that would work? And I think that's something that if you guys are amicable to that, we can definitely put that as part of the overall plan itself.
Mr. Mulchin, did we ever even approve the original one?
You approved the original one. We never came back to the second reading. We were waiting for the process of the turnover of the properties between Crescent and the actual landowners on that side, and the conditions that staff put on in regards to fire access. So once these would become city properties, that there be access to the existing homes, and there was a couple caveats as Margaret Ann outlined at the beginning of her presentation in regards to that. So we did have first reading approval, but we never came back for second reading approval on that side.
So, but the property was transacted based on the first reading and what we've already looked at and studied and dealt with in the past, right?
The transaction has not fully gone through yet, based on waiting for because it's part of the condition, as far as I understand. The condition of the land sale is the final approval of the overall plan itself.
Okay. I just want to quickly mention, I mean, this is kind of one of those, it's kind of like comorbidities for me, I suppose is the way to put it is, the infrastructure we don't have an answer on the infrastructure yet in that area. We don't even have a design for the road or how we're going to pay for it. It's not even in our 5-year plan. That concerns me with the 700 homes, much less putting another 213 units on a much smaller piece of property adjacent to it. So just the overall density increase, the 2035 land use change where, I think I've said this before, and I think from our staff's perspective and my perspective is to say, just because we said we're going to change this property from business park to something else doesn't necessarily mean that means we gotta make that a domino snowball effect where now, we got to change everything else. I think we kind of ran into that with multifamily in the past where we changed something from single family to multifamily, and then the lot beside them or the property beside them said, well, hey, now they're multifamily, so now multifamily makes sense on my property. And so then you have a lot in one area and you don't get mixed uses, which is, part of having some commercial or office or job creating property out there in that area would be really important to me. So sticking to the 2035 plan, the density, there seemed to be also a lot of concerns from the Planning Commission. Even though they did vote for it, there were tons of questions and concerns about technicality stuff that I don't look into as much as they do. But so I'd be willing to look at something like going back to the original plan, but nothing with the increased density like this for me.
Well, if that's something that you would like us to work with staff and yourselves in regards to that, I would like to make a motion to defer for tonight, and we'll go back to the table and see if there's some kind of compromise between the original plan and this plan that we couldn't, work out on that side.
I think if you just want to defer it, then we'll have to make the motion, right? I mean, is that?
You want to listen to see what
Does anybody else want to? Yeah, I mean,
Well,
you guys.
the
Anybody else have any questions or
The
thoughts?
one additional thing that garages don't answer for me is if we assume trash pickup, it's our problem. But traditionally on these higher density projects, that is the property owners with a commercial vendor basically providing that trash pickup. And until we can get a clearer picture of what is acceptable, some kind of guidelines, some kind of idea that we can live with in the long term, sustain over, because this is not the last time this type of project is going to be before us. And I hate to open the floodgates to say we're going to assume the responsibility for getting down an alleyway, whether it's got a garage or not, and what that does for the long-term aesthetics of a development. I'd rather have a clear picture as to what is a good policy for us as a city to have. So for me, that's where the hang-up would be. I just wanted to be that, so that's on the table for a discussion.
Okay.
And maybe staff can help you get a little clearer picture as to what that is. I mean, have a private, commercial taking care of your trash, then it's the developer's problem or whoever is maintaining the property. But if we assume the responsibility to pick up those trashes and find some way to get down the alleyway, then the people are going to be calling us. And that's going to be a city problem. And that city problem is from now on. And I just feel uncomfortable accepting that responsibility without some clear guidelines as to some policy that we can live with.
And one of the things that we have had happen, I think specifically in Three Rivers, that we passed an ordinance back 3 or 4 years ago to be able to give the option for private developments to get trash pickup, but they had to meet certain requirements. The streets had to be wide enough, the roads had to be built to city standards. Because what was happening in Three Rivers, the alleyways were not built to city standards, and the alleyways were failing when the trash trucks were getting on there, and then there was no homeowner association money to be able to fix the streets, so the city had to go back and fix all the streets. So there's several different caveats that come into play. But any other discussion?
Move for deferral.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right, Ms. Wright, will call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Can I ask one question? I apologize. Never mind. Aye.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Marshall.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move to amend 30, or move into amend in Leadership Rutherford. If y'all don't want to stay any longer, y'all don't have to stay. It's 8:15, so y'all have been signed off. Y'all are free to go. Thank y'all for coming out. Just remember that at election time. All right, I'm on a roll. All right, we'll move into amending 33.3 acres in general zoning PRD along West Thompson Lane, 2018-427. Ms. Green.
Thank you. Our third public hearing this evening is for you to consider an amendment to a PRD for property located along West Thompson Lane. This property is just over 33 acres, and it consists of single-family attached and single-family detached homes. And the developer is currently building the development, Blue Sky Construction, and specifically in the program book is a requirement that the townhomes utilize a dumpster for solid waste management, and that and they wish to make a change to that to use the city services for solid waste services. Because it was specifically outlined in the PRD, it requires a PRD amendment. I would say this application is somewhat different than the one you just considered, because this development only has public roads, so a garbage truck would be traveling along roads that are built to city standards. And half of the development currently does receive, half of the development, a little less than half, city services with the single-family detached type house. So they are wishing to use the carts. Mr. Smith, Joey Smith, is our solid waste director, and the developers reached out to him to see if this is something that they could serve, and they believe that they can. And so the area that's located near the entrance that was previously reserved for a dumpster, they're proposing to now convert to a recycling center, and then also we have had a change in how mail will be serviced in our community. All new developments will not be built with individual mailboxes as we may be accustomed, but will be required to use mail kiosks or ganged units that include single-family detached and single-family attached. So considering this and knowing that the city really has no say in that matter, that we need to accommodate that type of development, I asked the developer to go ahead and design an area that can be utilized for the kiosk. And so the area that's shown on the plan before you shows the enclosure for the recycling center and the mail kiosk, which is being proposed. So this change does not affect the units, the design, or the development, but it does affect how solid waste is managed and, of course, how mail is serviced. The Planning Commission considered this item and recommended in a vote 7-0 that you do approve the PRD amendment request. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. Mr. Roundtree, he's here if you have questions for him as well, and he's representing Blue Sky Construction.
Hey, Mr. Gore, I have a quick question. And since I'm on a roll,
Go.
so believing that, knowing that we can pick up the trash, but historically we've not picked up trash in townhome developments,
Right.
why would we start?
That's a great question, and one that I've just been thinking about for the past 5 minutes. So quite
The
honestly,
reason I asked that, well, you ought to have an answer. You've had 5 minutes.
to be totally blunt with you, so I'm going to try to channel
Let me
Joey.
preface that. We were in a meeting 2 weeks ago with Recycle Rutherford, and we're talking about how solid waste is going to change moving forward. And that, from looking at your pro formas on what things are going to cost, I'm not sure if we're already having trouble paying to pick up the single-family developments and the developments we already have in place. My question would be why, if we do pick these up, what's going to keep all these other multifamily developments coming back now saying, well, you're picking up this development, why are you not coming to pick up all of our developments too? And then we really get into an issue.
Right. So I'll give you my 30,000-foot thoughts that I've just pulled together. I'll try to articulate fairly well. If we're going to be in an area to pick up carts already,
So we have a route where a truck is already passing through that area. It would make sense to go ahead and include that area, whether it be townhomes or, I mean, if you got single-family homes across the street from townhomes, it may help in the revenue generation, since we are going to be charging the fee, that we would be, say, just picking up one side of the street and then leaving. If we can pick up both sides of the street, we're incurring that expense, and so that you would double your revenue effectively, right? Instead of just going down one side of the street and then leaving the other side of the street to go do it in a commercial compactor. So I would say I don't know this area well enough to give you a pure answer, but I'm saying if we've got an area that's got carts on one side of the road, even though it's townhomes on the other side of the road, I would suggest we go ahead and do it to generate the revenue, because we're going to start charging a fee, and we're going to start, and that helps us on our revenue side of our pro forma. If there's physical limitations with regards to these alleys, I am concerned, and I haven't been out and ridden with some of the truck solid waste drivers. Alleys concern me just from the physical constraint issue and the delivery of service issue, from the standpoint that if people do park in the alley and you're not able to get trash, and you're charging them for a fee and you're not able to deliver the service, that's going to be a big problem, especially when we're charging a fee for service if we don't deliver. So there's a physical constraint issue, and then there's an economy of scale issue. So I'm not, without looking at these things individually, I don't know if I can give you a straightforward, clear-cut answer. It may just need to be a case-by-case basis. In this particular instance, if we are going to be out there anyway, and we are going to be picking up carts based on the fact that they're single-family units, I would say let's go ahead and pick up the townhomes. The other area that we talked about previously, where they're in the cart, where they're in the alleys, I would have more of a concern in that regard with regards to a physical constraint. I don't know if that answers your questions, or if you all are on the same wavelength, but that's my initial thoughts.
Probably for us right now, at least for me, the issue is that our cost of services for picking trash up right now, just say at $15 per household per month, and we're only charging $5 per month.
Right.
So any home that we bring on right now to pick trash up, we're at a $10 loss.
Correct.
And that's
we're going to have to get. That's why the pro forma, and I won't go into those numbers quite yet, because I'm not confident in the numbers. But we do need to. It's $5 is we're losing money on every new home we pick up, single family residential, and we need to get that number up to where we're at least breaking even, which I would hope to get there within the next 2 to 3 years. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I've got a question about the recycling piece to that. When we were at the Recycle Rutherford meeting a couple of weeks ago, they were talking about the level of contamination on the recycled pickup locations and how much of that actually ends up going in the landfill, even though it's designed to be recycled. I don't know the precedent for a standalone recycled facility or drop-off like this, but what are the odds that this is going to turn into something that just goes to the landfill because there's not a for lack of a better word, an educational element associated with directing people how to appropriately recycle, and then it ends up in the landfill, and we feel good because it says recycling on the outside, and then we dump it in the landfill. So,
yeah, great point.
I guess I can't answer that question specifically, but I did ask how they intended to have this service or picked up. And apparently there are 2 companies in Rutherford County that provide that service, and it's an affordable service. And my concern was I didn't want the condition of this area to become, for lack of better terms, trashy or junky,
right.
Broken glass around. There is an owners association here that would be responsible for maintaining it, but I also wanted to have a good start. I also didn't want the fact that it's visible from Thompson Lane to encourage people to say, hey, I can just drop my recycling off there instead of going wherever we go now. I have somebody pick mine up at my house. And so there is a landscape berm that's helping screen this, in addition to it having a wall around it. And then a company is going to be paid a fee to pick this up. As far as the education process, I don't know about that. I don't know.
But what
doesn't seem to.
What Mr. Martin's talking about, we learned the other night that, and this was coming from our county Solid Waste Director Mike Nolan that even the recycle bins that are at the county convenience centers, that those people just throw whatever in there, and if it has food or different things, that they are contaminated. So even though that we say that we're recycling right now, that the majority of everything that's collected at our convenience centers goes straight to the landfill because it's all contaminated material. So that was one of the big things we learned the other night about that. Truly getting into recycling, we have to be able to educate that you just can't throw whatever you want to throw in there, that it actually ends up costing more money.
And I don't know the precedent. I mean, there may be other facilities like this throughout our city that I'm not aware of, but I mean, are there other single recycling locations as a, for lack of a better word, an amenity to a development that we have?
I am not aware of any that I've worked on for residential. I know our commercial developments oftentimes have cardboard within their dumpster enclosures. They'll have a place that you can recycle cardboard, and some of the offices have that ability. But as far as a residence, I haven't reviewed any plans. I'm looking at our planning director and assistant. Nobody else is aware of it, and them utilizing this. The developer felt strongly that this should be included in there because, of course, if it's included as part of the zoning, it's mandated. So I pushed back a little bit to make sure this really was the intent, because if they decide to not do it, it would have to come back and be a zoning amendment before which is a legislative process. But I guess you've sort of taken away my warm and fuzzies about my recycling personally. Thanks a lot.
I'm sorry. And can I blame the mayor on that? I mean, he brought it up originally, so
yeah.
Just reality.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting. All right, we need to conduct a public hearing on this PRD change. Anyone wishing to speak for or against, please come to the podium. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and we'll consider Ordinance 18OZ57 to amend the General Landings PRD, and this is the first reading.
I'm sorry, Margaret Ann, I just want to see if there was anybody who want to speak on this. But so with what we're seeing on our pictures, on our what's on my screen right here, and with what we've got in our packet, it doesn't kind of go all the way back through. I guess to the north it would be. Is this just one road that eventually kind of curves over there to Caroline? The Caroline Farms development, or
to simplify it, this is a U development. It's a rectangle lot, and the road kind of runs like a U. There is a connection over to the development you're talking about, but this development basically is a U on the side adjacent to the single family attached. They've got 33 single family lots, and on the remainder near Caroline Farms, they have the townhomes. So. There is a connection to the north at the top of the U to Caroline Farms.
So is it true of this entire development that there's going to be single family detached on one side of the road all the way around the U?
No. The single family detached is really only what backs up to the existing single family detached.
At North Point?
North
or North Shore, or whatever that is. I think it's North Point.
Northborough, that's right. Northborough Court is the name of the road.
Yeah. All right. So it's just those that are the single family?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what I'm kind of getting towards there on the trash pickup is it kind of makes sense when we look at this picture right here where you've got single family on this side and the townhomes on this side, but as soon as the road starts to curve over and come back down, it's all townhomes?
Yep. So they'll have to serve one side of the road, turn around and serve the other side of the road.
So we kind of lose our whole argument of, certainly. I mean, it's kind of diminishing the argument for me of we're already there, we're picking up.
Yeah, I think I think the catalyst for the whole situation was that not only is it a little confusing on how they pick it up, but Mr. Moore was very concerned for the homeowners. If there's trash pickup here and there's a dumpster here and our compactor, he thought it was just going to be confusing for those living in the development as well. So I feel like, in essence, I think the precedent, I think it's a good precedent if you can have single family, if there's already a route that's kind of utilizing that road, that would probably make sense. But Mr. Moore's primary concern was just the fact that one day there's carts out, the next day there's not, and then and just the homeowners may be confused about how they're going to interact with that. And then if we pull the compactor, really where the recycle center is where the compactor was. So he felt like that would be an appropriate allocation of that space to go ahead and try. I mean, it's one of those kind of things with recycling that you're always in the trying mode. But he's got a desire to kind of set the tone in terms of the green side. So that's kind of, I just wanted you to know the catalyst of why he did it. It was primarily over confusing the residents and making sure it was clear to them that everything's the same in that particular subdivision on how trash is handled.
What's the total mix in the development? Is it between single family and multi?
It's probably, I don't know the exact numbers, but it's probably 30% single family or less. It's really, there are two issues we had with the North World subdivision. They had a lot of flooding issues that were related to this particular lot. Do you have that, Margaret?
Yes, I do. The total site's 33.3 acres. There are 31 single-family detached lots and 130 single-family attached lots for a total of 161 units. The single-family detached was really a courtesy to the neighbors. They wanted to do all townhomes.
That's 19.5%. So, Mr. Gore, wouldn't it make sense moving forward as we're studying this, if we've got developments like this, even the one that we just looked at prior to this that was deferred, that had 100 and roughly 90 single-family homes and 120 plus townhomes, wouldn't it make sense to put a percentage requirement on there? Because if we're only in there to pick up 19% of the single-family homes, it would make sense to say there's a percentage that if the single-family percentage is over a certain percent, then the townhomes, then all of that can be included. But if not, in this case, would even make sense since there's only 19% that the single-family homes need to be picked up by the private hauler or use the trash compactor that multifamily.
Right.
So that way, it's almost like the county and city fire and police service that trying to find that cutoff line.
Right.
And that seems to make it tough.
I need to get more intimate with the routes that the solid waste trucks currently travel, right? And I think there's going to be a whole once we start measuring, I guess the number of carts per truck and trying to levelize routes. I've talked to that with solid waste about how certain trucks may be handling a lot more carts, even though their route may not be. They maybe have a shorter route, but they're actually handling more carts than another truck that's a longer route, but they're not getting as much tonnage. And that actually has to do with the time that they have to go to the landfill, the time spent in line, and then getting their route done. So some drivers are actually getting done quicker than others because the tonnage. I've even been told that in certain areas the garbage is heavier. I hadn't figured that one out, but so there's a whole world of solid waste that I'm trying to get into. What I would say is if you have, in some regards, higher density is going to be a better business case, because if you're picking up a whole lot of carts in a short area, that may be a good revenue generator. And if your truck is already going through that area, then why not pick it up? Again, the constraints or the physical limitations with townhomes and alleys and so forth, that concerns me a little bit. But if these are regular sized roadways and we've got a truck in the vicinity, it may just help us on the revenue side to go ahead and pick it up. But I do think in general, if you have a townhome development, I do believe that should be on a compactor. Where we have the hybrid, I do think a percentage may be worth developing a policy around if we want to go there. And so I just don't have a great answer for you on that right now.
Mr. Roundtree, and I hate to, put in limbo, but we're really having to readjust on how we're looking at solid waste moving forward, because it's picking up 30 homes and then adding an additional 190 on to pick up the 30. There may have to be a way that we figure out how we're going to do that, because it's not just the pickup now that we're going to have to talk about. It's the disposal that's coming up that none of us have dealt with before.
Right. In 2024, if the landfill closes, we're going to have to haul, unless we use some technology to waste to energy type technology, we're going to be hauling it a long way.
If I could, I'm not sure if there's any kind of way to kind of maybe change course midstream. I know Mr. Moore is very concerned because people are about to move in to that particular, some of those townhomes. So he's against it right now, going, I don't have any answer on how solid waste is going to be handled if this can't move forward in that regard. And I know he wanted to make sure that all the rolling carts could be stored in the garages. That was a real concern from an aesthetic standpoint, to make sure that the garages were adequate for that. So I mean, I think we got a serious concern we got to look at. But in this particular situation, I'm not sure if there's a stay or if there's something we can do for a temporary approval, so he has a ways to handle that, at least initially, because I know that was what he was really concerned about.
So the confusion that you're referencing, that's basically somebody's looking out their door and they look across the street at the house, and they say, well, they got a cart, but I got to take mine down to, I mean, so the plan was that they're going to take theirs where?
Originally, there's a compactor where that recycling center was. There's a compactor right at that location. And
street, put it in your neighbor's car.
Yeah. The neighbors are for.
Yeah. So if we keep it like it is, though, the worst case scenario is they just got to look across their street and see that somebody else has a cart that bought a single family home and they don't have a cart. They got to take it down to the compactor, and it stays a compactor and not a pseudo recycling center.
Potentially, I think. Again, yeah, I think that was his motivation, just to not have the clutter of the carts outside, so making sure the garages were large enough, making sure that there's no. I guess he just, yeah. I think that's basically it. He wanted to make sure it was really fluid, and he really wanted the recycling center. He thought that would be a good thing to do. So that's kind of where he's on
that. I don't know. I hate to put Mr. Burns in limbo, but whatever we decide on this one, and this is really where you're not trying to defer all these developments, but whatever we decide on this one is exactly what the next person is going to expect as well. There's no, all due respect to Mr. Smith, hey, let's try and see if this works. That's gotten us in a lot of predicaments on different developments. So I'm just not sure how we.
Well, Mayor, this is an amendment, so they've got a plan that they can go forward with, that we have approved, that we feel comfortable with, and what they're asking is for a reconsideration of it. So we've got a way to go forward in their development, and there's some unanswered questions that we need to do a little bit more research on before we make that decision. So I think that's the prudent and responsible thing for us to do, is to wait until we have some clearer answers.
So is there any kind of time issue? I mean, look, if we come back, I don't suspect that I would support a ratio that was an 80-20 type of a ratio. If we came to the spot where planning kind of came up with something to say, well, if it's a ratio thing of single family attached to detached and all that kind of stuff, I don't suspect I'd support a 20-80 as far as us picking it up. But if that's the way that the council voted, we could leave this open. You proceed with what you've got, and we could technically defer it. And if we get this thing worked out over the next few months, we could always send carts out there later, right? I mean,
right. Well, and where my question to staff, and I'm just not.
They got to build a compactor, though, right? So that would, It's
the adjoining development, Caroline Farms. I was asking, is that how many? Is that in a similar situation? I mean, I think you've got to look at it. I don't want to say regionally, but from a
single family.
You have to look at it from a route level.
No,
they have carts. Caroline Farms has carts next, and it's
and really this is a little different. This development, if you drive, I drive by there and see it every day. I mean, these townhomes are definitely more. They're not your smaller. I mean, these are larger townhomes. These townhomes are 2,500 to 3,100 square feet. So I mean, these are big units. So it's not like what we're talking about, 20-foot units. These are all larger. So, I mean, I get why this one would make sense, and there's no rear alleys. But going to what Councilman Shacklet said, it seems like we need to come up with a plan on how we're going to do that, as opposed to piecemealing individual development by development.
Well, and again, until we look at on a route basis, to me it makes a lot of sense if you've got a route that you're already, you're already taking the route, you've already got the man and the expense of the equipment out in that area. And if you do have wider townhomes, I mean, I'm just talking off the cuff now, but if you have wider townhomes and they're on the street and they've got a public street, it may make more sense. So it may may end up being a case by case basis, just based on the routing, what the garbage trucks can load, and then the physical constraints or lack of constraints that you can pick up the carts. I don't have a better answer for you right now. I don't know if there's going to be a cookbook formula that you can just adhere to on every. I mean, I love policies as well as anybody, but at the end of the day, sometimes it just requires looking at that specific situation and what the route is, and the physical constraints involved with the new development, and does it make sense to pick it up?
Just for a point of reference, that traditionally the townhomes that came into Murfreesboro, they were the ones that Decker and Belt built, like out at Kensington, Keeneland. Are those picked up by us, or are those private haulers?
So several years ago, we classified townhomes as multifamily development, and our zoning ordinance requires that any multifamily development of 15 units or more use a private hauler. If it was under 15 units, they could use something different. We created a zoning district just for townhomes a couple of years ago that pulled it out of multifamily, and so that zoning requirement that said that you had to use a dumpster or a compactor for townhomes no longer applied, because it's not considered multifamily as a form of housing anymore. It's single family attached. And so I hear what you're saying is you wanted us to develop further a policy for single family attached. It may be similar to multifamily, or it may be different, but look at the different factors that you've brought up, and certainly considering the cost associated with it, and come back to you with something.
I think I'd be prepared to defer it or decline it, but if it at least leaves the door open with them not having to go back all the way through the process, I'd prefer, I think, to defer it if it gives us the potential to buy some time to get some of those things ironed out. And then if this falls within the range of what we decide to do within the policy, it's sitting right there, we can do it. I know that doesn't really help with the stage that this is in, but that's that's beyond my control, and I think just doing the right thing here would be to make sure we get this get a little bit more clarity on it. So does anybody have any, deferral, or do you want to?
I agree with Darren. I mean, I get the efficiency part of looking at it from a perspective of saying there's several units down through there on the opposite side of the road, and you improve your efficiency if you pick those up. The only thing is, that's fine for the next 6 years or so, but then we're just picking up more trash, and we're going to pick up more trash and have to haul it somewhere. So, I mean, I don't know at that point that it really has a whole lot of efficiency, because I don't know what the percentage breakdown of curbside pickup versus transporting it from here to Huntsville or Camden or wherever it is that we haul it to. I mean, that 120-mile-an-hour round trip, or 100. I hope they don't do 120 mile an hour, but that distance of 120 miles one way is going to be a substantial amount of the cost. Then the pickup part may become minuscule. So I don't know that we're really getting a benefit of adding density, for lack of a better word, to the pickup.
I understand, and we would have to develop the pro forma and the fee to make it cover the cost, and then as we do in the water world, create a reserve fund for future expenses that may not be foreseeable. But as I said, maybe at the workshop, whatever pro forma we develop as a city, every private hauler is going to have that same they're going to have that same escalated cost. I mean, you could probably look at what our percentage increase on the fee will be over time, and every private hauler is going to have that similar type of incline or percent increase. So it does boil down in a lot of ways as to if there's, my biggest concern honestly is just the physical, when people start paying a fee, you better serve them in an excellent fashion. If there are physical limitations that disallow us for serving people in a very consistent and a very predictable fashion, then that's where I would have more cause for concern. If it's just number of homes and there's no physical constraints allowing us to pick up as many carts as we can, that would be, I don't necessarily, we'll haul the garbage we need to haul, and we will charge the fee that's needed to be charged. My biggest concern would be a physical constraint issue and where we would be inconsistent in delivering the service. And I just don't know this site well enough, and I would probably come back with you, quite honestly. I'm going to look at the site, and we can look at the length and the width and the different dimensions of the lots of the single family or the townhomes, and I'll get with Joey, and if there's not a physical constraint problem, we'll probably just recommend to pick it up.
And I'm not sure exactly what's the most appropriate thing, but if I could ask for some way that I could, with Mr. Burns at least initially, if we could, he may just have to get a private hauler initially to kind of work it out, because if we have to stick to the original program, because it's going to change, it's going to change the recycle center, change the whole compactor, all that, and we're talking probably 4 homes, that are probably in need for that pickup. Or I'm not sure exactly how many residents he's having moving in the next few weeks, but that if we're going to defer it, at least that we can kind of go with the plan he's asking for until we know differently, if that's possible. So at least he has a solution versus having to kind of, almost go and build a compactor, and all of a sudden we find out it's appropriate for him to go ahead and get, individual cars. So it kind of puts him, I want to give him a little direction so he knows what may, if we're kind of in limbo, at least have him have an answer.
Ms. Green, what's the best way to do that?
So if this doesn't get approved tonight and then later on second reading, the plan that's currently in place is the plan that would apply. We have, during the course of development, and of course we have allowed an alternative form of solid waste management until a certain number is reached. So a compactor is required here, but we've allowed them to put a dumpster in temporarily until they reach the number that we're looking for, which is usually 75 units. I would look to our legal department to see if we could do something different than the plan development program book specifically says, as far as allowing the townhomes to start using carts. I have sympathy for the developer, but then I have a little hesitation because I think once you give somebody something and then you try to take it from them, you will really hear about it. And so my history tells me that would be something to think about. And I'm not sure as far as zoning, if the zoning book specifically says that they have to use the compactor or the dumpster until they reach the number for the compactor, that you can allow carts yet. So I don't know if Mr. Tucker has a different interpretation.
I was looking at the ordinance.
Oh, great. So I'll keep talking until he's done reading. But I do have concerns with giving something to somebody and taking it from them.
I think the answer for us tonight is going to be that we need to defer it, and we can't sit here probably and work out what the best route for the meantime is. I mean, I'd be willing to sit here and say publicly that I'm willing to let staff try to work something out in the next month. I don't want that to be a forever kind of a limbo thing, but one of our meetings in November, we come back and there's a little bit more clarity on this one way or another. So for our purposes, I would just move to defer it, let the staff work it out. I do agree that taking something away is more difficult, but as it relates to, can he wait a couple of weeks to build the compactor instead of the recycle? I mean, certainly I'll just say let staff try to figure out if there's a way to do that without us taking carts out there and picking them up. I mean, if it's within our ordinance and within the PUD stuff, y'all work it out.
And we may be able to let them use carts, but a private hauler, not a city.
Yeah, I don't want us to get in the situation of we've delivered carts and we go out there and start picking carts up. I think that's a horrible situation to put ourselves into. And plus, we're looking at percentages, perhaps, of. I think we need to go through a workshop or something and look and decide what percentages we think is allowable as far as townhomes versus single-family homes, and make sure that we're doing the right thing, because currently I'd rather vote no right now than to approve it, and so in that case I think a deferral would be the appropriate thing to do, because you can easily get a private hauler to haul it for the next month or two until we come up with an answer or percentage that would work this out. But we certainly don't need to provide a service and then take a service away. So I'm going to make the motion for a deferral.
Second.
Yes,
Madeline.
So, were you going to make a motion?
No, I was
I thought you were
seconding your motion.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
That's fine. No problem.
Motion second. Ms. Shriver, call the roll, please.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Way.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
I will now consider rezoning approximately 204 acres located along south of John Bragg Highway, RSA Type 2, RS6, RS10. Mr. Blum.
Thank you, Mayor McFarland, and good evening, Mayor McFarland and members of council. Our next item is a rezoning request located south of John Bragg Highway and west of Double Springs Road. It's for property that was annexed by the city around 2013, and you can see, I'm going to outline the property that was annexed in 2013. A portion of that property was zoned CH along John Bragg Highway, a portion was zoned RM16, and the balance was zoned RS15. The RS15 zone was kind of a placeholder. The property cannot be developed on city sewer. It had to be developed on a step system. And if the City Council will recall, at its October 18th meeting, you approved the use of a step system for this property. The step system carries with it inherent limitations on the number of units and the number of bedrooms that can be developed here. The applicant's request is for the portion of the property that's currently zoned RS15, which RS15, as you know, is single-family residential detached lots with a minimum lot size of 15,000 square feet. So that's approximately 204 acres out of the original property that was annexed back in 2013. He is requesting to rezone the area in purple on the map before you to RSA Type 2. That's a total of 26 acres to RSA Type 2, which is single-family residential attached district, the suburban townhouse option. Approximately 140 acres to RS6. RS6 is single-family residential detached lots with a minimum lot size of 6,000 square feet. And the area that forms kind of the L along the eastern and southern boundaries, he is requesting to rezone to RS10, which is single-family residential district with a minimum lot size of 10,000 square feet. Now, as I mentioned, there are inherent limitations based upon the step system, and I included a letter from Mr. Bill Huddleston that was sent to the Water Resources Department dealing with the allowable number of bedrooms and units on this property given the step system. Mr. Huddleston's letter indicates that 1,578 bedrooms would be permitted on this property, and this not only includes the 204 acres that is the subject of this rezoning, but it also includes the existing RM16 property as well. So for the 204 acres that we're considering tonight, as well as the RM16, would yield a total of 1,578 bedrooms. So one could assume that if all of those were two-bedroom units, it would be 789 units, including the multifamily that's not a part of this request, or 526 units if all of the units were three-bedroom units. I think that Mr. Elliott, the developer, based upon what his representative said at the Planning Commission meeting, would like some combination of the number of bedrooms So we don't know the exact number of units, but based upon the limitations of the step system, he would be capped at that number of bedrooms listed in Mr. Huddleston's letter. So if we had 526 units, including the multifamily zone property that's not a part of this request, which is about 35 acres or so, that would put us at a little bit over 2 dwelling units per acre. With approximately 240 acres at 526 dwelling units. The comprehensive plan recommends that the subject property develop as suburban residential, and the suburban residential recommendation is kind of what we see around the perimeter of the city. It's a lower density, single-family residential recommendation by the future land use map. The plan calls for a density of 2 dwelling units to 3.54 dwelling units per acre. The proposed density falls roughly within this, based upon Mr. Huddleston's numbers, falls within this range that the plan calls for. Now, the plan says that RS 10, 12, and 15 are consistent zoning districts with the suburban residential recommendation. However, it also does make provisions for single-family attached and smaller lots with the provision of open space. And there is required formal open space and open space in the RSA Type 2 zone. And while this won't be an amenity, the development will be required to have open space in the form of the step fields, which of course houses will not be able to be constructed on. A couple of points that I wanted to bring up with regard to the major transportation plan. There are a couple of projects that will impact this property. The extension of Haven Drive is on the major thoroughfare plan. That would be an east-west connector from South Rutherford Boulevard to the subject property. And then also the Irby Lane connector, which would go from Bradyville Pike up to John Bragg Highway. Any item on the major thoroughfare plan that impacts this property, the developer would be required to dedicate right-of-way and construct those improvements as it relates to his property. The Planning Commission conducted a public hearing on this matter at its September 5th regular meeting and voted unanimously 7-0 to recommend approval of this rezoning request. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Mr. Clyde Roundtree is here representing the applicant, Mr. Elliott, and Mr. Elliott is in the audience as well.
All right, any questions for Matthew? All right. We need to conduct a public hearing. Mr. Roundtree, do you have anything you want us to? Okay. All right. We will open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this rezoning request, please come to the podium. All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. We'll consider ordinance 18OZ58 to rezone an area along John Bragg Highway, RSA Type 2, RS6, RS10. First reading.
Mr. Gore, can you remind me, I'm sorry, I know it's only been a couple weeks, but why with the proximity, where this thing is, the proximity to the highway and to Rutherford Boulevard, why isn't it sewer?
The sewer to the west of Rutherford Boulevard experienced significant overflows, wet weather or infiltration inflow induced overflows. So it does not have the capacity to handle any more discharge into that system. We've got 8-inch lines, and we've been rehabbing that area pretty aggressively, but we've allowed limited new development into that system, but it is the long-term plan is to actually bring a large interceptor down Lytle Creek, turn it up Bradyville Pike, and then get up here into this 600-acre area. The only challenge with that, it's about a $20 million capital investment, and for 600 to 900 acres, it just was not deemed a good business case. So the step system afforded itself or lended itself to be a better business case in this area to develop this small 600-acre area out. That answers your question. The reason we got into the step business was because in certain times, either through land acquisition or construction costs, it was not deemed a viable expenditure to get sewer, either by the developer to get sewer there or for the department to get sewer there. And so the step system is just a better business case for the developer to pursue to sewer this area.
Is that step system serving the CH too?
I'm sorry?
The CH there? Is that?
Yes, that's part of. I believe that's part of the area that would be involved with the step system.
So, I got to go back to this. This may be Ms. Green. We got RSA here. We gonna pick the trash up or not?
I can defer to Mr. Blomley, but I would think that we would.
That's not something that we have broached with the developer at this point. And I was actually going to say when I got up here that, to my knowledge, there were no solid waste issues with this particular application. But no, that's not something that we broached with the developer. I think that for townhouse developments, as staff, it's always our first inclination to require that the developer, when he submits a site plan to us, provide a compactor if they're over that 75 units, or a dumpster if they're below the 75 units.
Okay. One of the things, and I'll keep you up there, Mr. Blomley, just one of the things when I looked at this that gave me a little bit of concern was just the fact that there's already RM12 adjacent to this on one side. We've got a piece that's to the west also, to the north of the RM12, that's in the county, but via our 2035 plan in our packet says that it's should be multifamily. If we increase the density in this from RS15 to RSA and RS6 primarily, right, with a little sliver in here of RS10, the density number is going to go substantially higher. So how can we, how are we going to address the fact that we've sort of used up, quote unquote, the density potentially in that area, and that the way that the land use plan is now isn't necessarily going to be how maybe it should be if we do this?
Mr. LaLance, one thing that I can say, the RM12 that you see right here, it's built out. It's the Aspen Heights apartment complex, and while the zoning permits 12 dwelling units per acre, and I'm going to look at Ms. Green because I know she reviewed this. I believe that probably came in at about 5 or 6 dwelling units per acre. It's a very non-traditional apartment complex. Some of you may be familiar with it. A number of the units are detached units, and it kind of looks like a single-family neighborhood, but it's a fairly low-density apartment complex. The area here, you're correct. It does say on the comprehensive plan, it does recommend that for multifamily. Our comprehensive plan is an advisory document. It doesn't require mandatory compliance. And one of the things that Mr. Anthony and I were just talking about earlier this week is a need to kind of go back through and update our future land use map. And Mr. Smotherman and Mr. Martin, coming up next Wednesday, will see our first round of amendments to the future land use map. Those are retroactive amendments to where zoning decisions have not been consistent with the future land use map. In the future, we kind of want to reverse course and update our future land use maps so that there is more consistency in the future. We know that there is room for improvement on the future land use map, and so I think that's one of the things we're going to be looking to bring to the Planning Commission is to look holistically at the future land use map for ways that we can improve it. It's a living document, and we want to improve it. And whether or not multifamily is an appropriate land use for that particular parcel, I think, is something that we would probably look at when we do that evaluation. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's.
No matter what goes on that property, it's probably going to experience the same situation with the sewage. It's probably going to have to be
I've probably got the presentation I gave a couple of weeks ago that kind of showed a concept layout that showed the green space and kind of the layout. And so I think, and I said it then, the zoning may be a little bit misleading as to what the actual density is going to allow out there, because the bottleneck's going to be the ability to treat and discharge the sewer. They're going to have to keep enough soils reserved so that the drip fields for the effluent, that there's enough. It's 0.2 gallons per day per square foot, and so you find out where your good soils are, you back that in, and that's how the bedroom count was effectively established. Is that you assume 100 gallons per day per bedroom. And so that really will be the factor, the limiting factor on what gets built out there is going to be the soil. I could probably pull that PowerPoint up for you if you needed me to.
That step system is a field, right? Is that step?
Yes, sir. It's just a field. It's a field that is mowed and maintained. It is fenced.
It's not green space. It's not going to be common
No,
ground.
sir. It's not really intended to have parks or dog parks or picnics on it. It's really just dedicated green field that you don't want ATVs and you don't want vehicular traffic on it. It's just mowed, and it's used to drip the treated effluent into the soil. It's very pretty. They're nice if you've been on seen a subdivision with a step system.
So it looks like if they built all two-bedroom, if it's just all two-bedroom, I have no idea what the mix might be. It probably doesn't seem likely, but kind of worst-case scenario, that would still only be a 3.5 or about 4 units per acre or something like that.
I don't know exactly, but I could.
Yeah.
I'll lurk behind him this time.
That's fine. Yeah, do it.
Yeah, I think overall it's probably about 240 to 250, including the multifamily. So if you had 789 two-bedroom units, you'd be looking at a little bit over 3 dwelling units per acre.
Well, yeah.
I don't see it in here.
All right. Any questions?
3.9.
If there's no other questions, I'll make the motion to approve.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Rockville, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye.
Thank you. It's up on. If they put it on the screen, you can see it on the screen now if you want to.
Okay.
That's kind of what we were looking at.
It's not a lot for that acreage. All right, we'll now move to rezoning approximately 29.4 acres along Buffalo River Drive. Mr. Anthony.
Yes, sir. Give me just a moment. My technological skills, not all that great. They hired me for my looks, not for technology. Okay. The applicant, Achiever Development, is requesting rezoning to PRD for 2 parcels located along the east side of Cason Lane. The property totals 29.44 acres, 22.5 of which is currently part of the Three Rivers PRD. If you look at the map in front of you, the blue would indicate what's already part of Three Rivers. The purple would indicate the acreage that's being added. The approved Three Rivers plan for the 22.5 acres, the blue, includes 127 zero-lot line townhouse units on 22.5 acres for density of 5.7 units per acre. And I sort of wanted to show you, this is the existing plan that was approved back in January 2016. As you can see on the screen, the approved layout is very similar to the proposed layout for that 22.5 acre section. Most of the changes are to the east side, where about 7 acres are being added to the PRD. If approved, the gardens at Three Rivers PRD would consist of 151 units, 70 of those being zero lot line houses and 81 being townhouses. Overall density would be 5.13 dwelling units per acre. So even with the units being added in, the density on the proposed is actually lower than the approved plan due to that added acreage. Murfreesboro 2035 shows 2 land use designations for this property, one being auto urban general residential and the other being suburban residential. And the proposed densities within those land use designation boundaries are 5.64 dwelling units per acre and 3.46 dwelling units per acre, respectively. Both of these are within the recommended density ranges for those land use designations. Adjacent zoning includes PRD on the west, RSA Type 1 on the north, RS12 on the east, and RS10 on the south. The Planning Commission reviewed this request at its September 5th meeting and voted to send this forward to you with a favorable recommendation. Staff can answer any questions that you may have, and Rob Mulchan with SEC is here to represent the applicant and can talk more about this project.
Any questions for staff? All right. Mr. Mulchan, do you want us to do the public hearing, or do you have a presentation? Okay, come on.
Thank you, gentlemen and ladies. Let's see here. All right. Rob Olson, SEC, here to give you a review of the changes to the PRD that we had a year or so ago on that side. As you can all remember, this is a part of the original Three Rivers plan from way back in the late 90s, early 2000s, that side. So, whoa, what's going on here? That was through. As is one portion of the overall development, which is primarily almost completed at this time on that side. But this is what they called Area C. Area C consists of about 142 homes originally, way back with the original plan on that side. So it was about 6.3 dwelling units to the acre on that side. These were all 35-foot wide single-family detached homes at that time with about 1,400 square feet minimums, but they had no amenities whatsoever planned for this. So moving forward, we got a couple items. You can show our existing services on that side, coming off of the existing Three Rivers side. And you can also see in regards to the existing zoning that's out there that we're taking a sliver of the River Downs development on that side. This is kind of existing homes along the streetscape along Cason Lane, which is the homes that back up to the alleyway that we have butt on the backside of our development. And this is looking at the existing alleyway and the homes that are adjoining to the alleyway that we will be adjoining to on the other side as conceived way back in the original plan back in 99 and 2000. This is the views of the pasture that we're going to be developing on. The current plan that we had approved last year called for 127 homes. This was a mixture of cottages and villas. The cottages were more or less the single-family attached townhomes as you see in pink, and the villas were the blue zero lot line type duplex homes on that side. This had about 3.1 acres of open space, but our dwelling units were only at 5.64. Moving forward, as we went through this project between ourselves and the River Downs development, there was a sliver of land that was contiguous to our property there on the right-hand side that was between an existing drainage way and our property on this side. The question was brought up by our client as to what's going to happen with that property between the creekway and our property. It didn't seem like there wasn't enough room to be feasible for the River Downs community to develop that portion of the property. Our client and the developer River Downs got together. They were willing to sell us that property for us to better use that land than it being, there really wasn't a use for on the River Downs side. So moving forward to the plan today, as you can see, we've gone and incorporated that acreage. We picked up about 6 acres. Picking up that 6 acres, our dwelling units actually went down, so we actually increased our dwelling units by about 24 units from the original plan from last year, but only 9 units from the original plan way back in 2000. So it's a small incremental change based on the original plan to today's plan on that side. The mixture, homes and cottages and villas are exactly the same as what we were proposing in the last plan. So what we're doing is actually increasing the amount of land to the project itself and increasing the number of units, but the overall density goes down. But we also added an additional 4 acres of open space. So we'll talk about a little bit of that open space program as we go forward on the project. But that was one of the bigger things about this development is we're picking up a lot of open space to go into this project. You can see the different phasing plans on that side. Phase 1 on the upper right-hand side of the green. 3 and 4 are the phases that will incorporate incorporates the newer additional 6 acres of land on that side. Cottages, as we talked about last time, again, these are the views of the cottages on that side. 1-story homes, 1,300 square feet minimums on that side. These are rear entry garages to public streets. This is what the view of the homes. These are very similar to the homes that you can see out at Valley Brook, out on Compton Road, that have recently opened on the development out there. The villas themselves, indicated in the blue here, you can see they're scattered around the edges. This is also 1- and 2-story homes. Like I said, these are zero lot line development homes. These have decorative garage doors that face the streets, all public streets. These will have a mixture of brick, stone, and cement board siding and vinyl siding. The amenities, we can talk about that. The main amenity clubhouse is in the same location as it was the original plan on that side. As part of that, we'll be looking at incorporating as part of the new open space, some extra open space parkland, but also incorporating a trail system along that green space that we added to the development on that side. So an added amenity comes along with this additional 6 acres that we're bringing onto the project on that side. Looking at kind of ideas of what we're thinking about from the clubhouse standpoint, very nice architectural elements, but also more or less a gathering type space for the residents on that side. So we'll have these pieces in there, but also looking at some community gardens to be incorporated as well. Access, we have 2 main primary points. One would be the Buffalo Trace at the roundabout there, and also another street connection to the south end, or to the south end of our project on that side. We'll also be incorporating 2 future stubs to the properties to the north on that side, and also looking at the continuation of the street. We're looking at crossing that creekway and tying into the River Downs subdivision on that side. So we'll have an adjacent means of ingress, egress to the east as well. Looking at using our typical roadway cross sections, 40-foot and 50-foot public right-of-ways. Landscaping characteristics, we talked about this last time. The cottages themselves and the villas will have a good landscaping package to go along to enhance the streetscape. And this is looking at the landscaping component that'll go along with the cottages on the outside. Appreciate your time and consideration of this amendment to the PRD, and I'm available for any questions now or after the public hearing.
Any questions for Mr. Malshaw? Very nice. Thank you. All right, seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak for or against, please come to the podium. All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. We'll consider ordinance 18OZ59 to rezone an area along Buffalo River Drive, PRD, first reading.
So moved. Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skills Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll now look at a mandatory referral for abandonment of a portion of Manson Court, Manson Pike right-of-way. Ms. Green.
Thank you. The Planning Commission considered a request made to them for mandatory referral and a right-of-way abandonment for property located along Manson Pike and Manson Court. This goes hand in hand with an item which you considered tonight for annexation and for a zoning change. Because that plan was deferred, we would ask that you not take action on this right-of-way abandonment request, since it hinges on the development plan that which you reviewed before, and defer action on it. And when we come to a better plan with the previous development, we would bring it back to you if that's aligns with your wishes as well.
All right.
And there's no public hearing for this.
I don't think there's any need to defer it if we just won't consider it, correct?
That's fine.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Green. All right, we now have Mr. Cooper, who's going to tell us about annexation progress reports. Mr. Cooper.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is just another round of annexation progress reports that require a public hearing. All of the annexations are currently being serviced or would have service available pending development. We recommend a hearing be scheduled for December 6th. If you have any questions, I would be glad to answer them.
All right. Can we have a motion to set these public hearings for December 6th, please?
December 6th?
Yes, please.
So moved.
Not good for me, just FYI.
Okay.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris. Aye. Mr. LaLance.
Abstain?
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We now have an abandonment of a right-of-way and sale of remnant parcel to New Vision Baptist Church. Mr. Whitaker.
Mayor and members of council, New Vision Baptist Church came to us and requested to purchase a remnant piece of property. Property is located between the Old Nashville Highway, West College, and Thompson Lane. Most of you are probably familiar with this parcel of land. If it snows, you'll find Mr. Smotherman, I think, at the top of the hill, sledding down to the bottom. It is a remnant piece of property. It is public right-of-way. Today, we took it to the Planning Commission and asked for abandonment of the right-of-way. It was approved unanimously. We also took it to the Gateway Commission, and they recommend the sale of the property for $45,000, I believe it is. The contract's for $45,000. It is 2.33 acres. There's not a lot of use for that property for us, but the church would like to eventually put a parking lot on that for overflow parking. Mr. Ives and myself here, and be happy to answer any questions if there's any pertaining to this. I would ask that you consider this in two motions. The first one is the abandonment of the right-of-way. Second motion would be the sale of the property.
Okay. Can we have a motion for the abandonment of the right-of-way, please?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright?
Vice Mayor Skels Harris. Aye. Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade. Mayor McFarland.
Aye. And now is there a motion to sell the remnant piece of parcel?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright?
Vice Mayor Skels Harris. Aye. Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Whitaker.
Thank you.
All right, we'll now consider construction testing for Southwest Elementary School project. Mr. Griffith.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Happy to report that the construction of the Southwest Elementary School is progressing nicely. We're now in the vertical construction phase where the building's actually being constructed. This recommendation is to improve the construction materials testing contract with TTL in the amount of $102,554. A lot of this construction testing is actually required by the state, and they will have a full-time technician on staff to do that for us. We recommend approval of this contract with the funding source from the future bond issue. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions?
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright?
Vice Mayor Skels Harris. Aye. Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll now move to Kingdom Drive roadway improvements.
I think you skipped 24.
Did I skip the change order? I'm sorry.
It's actually a change order as well. So.
Middle Tennessee Boulevard, order number 2, change order. Mr. Griffith.
Regretfully, I do have a couple of change orders. This one is for the, in regards to the topsoil and the medians for Middle Tennessee Boulevard. At the request of the Urban Environmental Department, that the median areas receive 2 feet of topsoil instead of the planned 6 inches to help with the with healthier growth and less long-term maintenance of the planted materials. This increases the the project by $175,000 to $15,986,860. I would recommend approval of this, and with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Griffith?
This one could probably pay for itself with the survival of the plants with the depth of the soil. So I think this is a really good thing. I move for approval.
Second.
Motion second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We now have Kingdom Drive roadway improvements.
This is actually a change order as well. I probably should start leaving that out of the title, so you'll start considering it. This is for just some Class A1 riprap that was required actually under as slope protection for the bridge that was inadvertently omitted. This change order is an amount of $28,400 and will increase the overall contract price to $2,566,584. The city's portion of the funding will be from the 2016 bond issue. If you'll remember, this project, we're actually splitting some of the costs with the developer of the adjacent subdivision. I recommend approval and be happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions?
I'll move for approval. Second.
Motion second. Ms. Wright.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Griffith. All right, you have, looks like one beer permit.
Yes, Mayor, we have an ownership change and a name change for a location that currently had beer at 179 Mall Circle Road. The applicant meets our requirements. They do need to finish up their building codes inspections. So if you approve it tonight, we will not issue the permit until they have completed those inspections.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
You have one future recommended appointment for the Risk Management Committee. You have two reappointments, and I would really ask you to look at the next appointment there and consider that one when you're going to vote for Mr. Craig Kendall to the Risk Management Committee. That'll be at the next meeting.
We defer.
Any statements to pay?
Not tonight, Mayor.
All right. Any other business?
Mayor, if we could just quickly review the calendar. I sent you another email. I actually got, well, let me back up. The anticipation for November and December, just because it's holiday months, if we could run down those real quick, just to give council some insight, and I'll send you a calendar. You can comment on it. But November is a little bit odd in that the second Wednesday for the workshop falls later than normal. So what we would anticipate is a council meeting next week on the 8th, if one is necessary, and then a workshop on the 14th, Wednesday the 14th. And that was the change, Mayor, that we had.
That's what I was looking. That's what I originally had.
Yeah, it's hard to, well, November, because it starts on a Thursday, pushes that second Wednesday way off. So the week after that's Thanksgiving, so unlikely to have a meeting then.
Do
Go ahead.
Do you know if we have a lot of business for the 8th? Do we have public hearings scheduled next week? Because I know we're going to have two council members that will not be here next week. If
Okay. So that one we'll push off.
Okay.
Okay. The 14th workshop, no meeting on the 15th, and on that Thursday, as is normal for a workshop week. Thanksgiving's the following week, and then the 29th would be a council meeting, and we do have public hearings scheduled on that date.
Mr. Kendall, just in case, if we're not going to meet, so we're not going to meet this upcoming on the 8th, is that correct?
We're going to try and avoid the 8th because of the absences.
Well, if y'all need, since we're not going to meet the next week, Thanksgiving week, if for some reason that we do need to meet on the 15th to get whatever paid before the holiday if we need to meet.
Okay, we'll hold
Have
that.
the workshop that Wednesday and meet that Thursday night.
I will not be able to make the
Okay.
14th or the 15th, so.
Okay.
yeah,
But
but that-
if there's
that's fine.
business that y'all need us to
Okay.
do, 3 weeks may be sometimes a long time, but if it works, great.
Okay. And then the 29th, we do have public hearings, so we'll need to meet on that date. And then if we go to December on the 6th, we have a council meeting on the 6th of December, a workshop on the 12th. Council meeting on the 20th, and then no council meeting that following week, which is a week of Christmas.
And then I assume we probably, would we have one on January 3rd?
And then January 3rd would be the next one.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
Can you go over the December ones again, please?
December, we had anticipated a council meeting on the 6th, workshop on the 12th, and a council meeting on the 20th.
Thank you. Okay.
It's subject to change if we have items, or if we don't have enough items, we'll obviously cancel the council meeting, but that'd be the schedule.
Okay. Any other business?
The Nelson Mazda of Murfreesboro had their grand opening out there this morning, and it's exciting to see all the car places going out around Fortress and stuff. But I encourage everybody, if you're interested in buying a car, shop local and check those places out. And I know last Saturday night, I believe it was, that the mayor and Ronnie and Madeline and myself were all at the Get Out and Vote event. And certainly next Tuesday is the election, and I encourage everybody to get out and vote.
And just in case, if we're having our workshop next Wednesday, and if we don't meet the next week, it's hard to believe this, but happy Thanksgiving. So we may not meet between now and Thanksgiving. So with that, we'll stand adjourned.
Yeah.